Hello everyone, my name is Kevin Canali. I'm one of the students from Bastyr University. We were here over the past school year working with the CRC, implementing an intervention to try to educate the volunteers so that they can better empower the participants here. So what we did is we taught 4 lessons over the past month, and we're here to show you these lessons so that you can have an ongoing training. We hope you enjoy what you learned today, and thank you for your time. Hello everyone, my name is Kevin Canali, and I'm here today to talk to you about our first topic, which is motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing is a technique that's used to help try to fight ambivalence in people. And what ambivalence is it's an indecision or indecisiveness that doesn't allow a person to make a yes or no decision. So they may revert back to old habits that they've had, but what we want to try to do is we want to try to take ambivalence and guide a person towards making a healthful decision. So how we do this is by using 3 techniques. The first technique is reflective listening. So with reflective listening, what we're doing is we're reiterating what a person has said to us. We're repeating it back to them in a paraphrased way, and we're allowing them to feel heard, respected, and understood. So with reflective listening, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build rapport with a person. So especially with a participant at the CRC, having just a few minutes together, maybe once a week, maybe we only get to see someone one time. But even with a 10 or 15 minute encounter, you can build rapport with someone if you're allowing them to feel respected and heard. So with that, we're going to move on to the next idea, and the next idea is affirmations. So affirmations are slightly different than compliments. With compliments, all we're doing is we're looking at a person at the surface level and we're letting them know that we enjoy something about themselves. We might say, you have a nice haircut, or I like your outfit looks great, and that helps to build a person up if they identify with it. So one problem with compliments is if they don't identify with it, then they're not going to accept your compliment, they're going to reject it, and they won't be built up by it. So if a person has a good haircut on Monday and you say, hey, I like your haircut, they're going to identify with that, and that's going to help them to feel good about themselves. But if on Friday the same person comes in and you say, hey, I like your haircut, but maybe they've had a bad hair day, they feel frazzled, so they don't identify with it, so it's not going to help them build themselves up. So what we want to do with affirmations is we want to go deeper. We want to try to find something like, hey, you really love your children, or you want what's best for your family. Something like that that goes a little bit deeper, that they can identify with on a day-to-day basis, not based on how they're feeling. And the last idea is asking permission. So with asking permission, we're putting the participant in the driver's seat. And as far as we're concerned, everyone should be fully autonomous. That means fully in control of their own lives. And we're not here to try to dictate to anyone what to do, but rather all we want to do is guide people. So with asking permission, we're taking ambivalence and we're trying to give the person the ability to actually decide yes or no if they want to do something. So if they feel unsure about something, if we've built them up, we've built rapport with them, then later on we can ask permission and guide them towards making a healthier decision. So thank you all for your time today. Hope you have a good day. So really quick, I'm gonna show you what an example is for asking permission. So in your mind, picture us down at the food center and Anne is getting ready to pick out a treat.
Ooh, I'm so excited to spend my last 3 points on this bag of chips.
Anne, can I make a suggestion to you, please?
Sure.
What if instead of getting a bag of chips, we got a bag of salt-free popcorn instead?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do that instead.
Hi, I'm Casey, and for today's lesson I'm going to be talking about understanding food labels. So the first thing I like to look at on the food label is the serving size per container. This is important because if it's 5 grams of sugar, it's going to be 5 grams of sugar per half a cup, or 5 grams of sugar for 5 pieces. Now the new FDA labels will have a separate portion for the entire container, so that you know if you were to eat that entire container exactly how many calories, how much sugar, how much sodium is going to be in that entire container. So this is the first area I like to look at. The second area I like to look at is sodium. So throughout this lesson, I'm going to go with the rule of fives, just because I'm going to throw out a lot of numbers at you, so we're going to go with the rule of fives. So the American Heart Association has recommended not to go over 2,000 milligrams of sodium per day. So I've broken this down to limit sodium to about 500 milligrams per meal and about 250 milligrams per snack. Sodium is a very important thing to look at because it's going to help you to lower your hypertension and just help with your overall blood. So the third thing I like to look at is fiber. So fiber, again, going with the rule of fives, you want to try to get at least 25 grams of fiber per day. Fiber is one of those things in the United States that we tend to not get enough of. So looking at 5 grams per serving will give you about 25 grams a day. Just to give you an idea of what that looks like, a half a cup of black beans cooked is about 8 grams of fiber, and 1 apple is about 5 grams of fiber. The most important thing, I think, of the entire label to look at is added sugars, or the sugar label. So going back to the new FDA regulations, the added sugar label is now going to be right below where the sugar is. So you'll have a sugar line and then the added sugars. What that means is everything that has been added to that product that is not naturally occurring. So as it is right now with the older labels, it doesn't show you how much they've been adding, how much added sugar has been added to those labels. So if you do see an old label, try to look at the ingredient list because that'll tell you exactly what's in there. So if you see things like maltodextrin, sucrose, fructose, things like that, high fructose corn syrup, those are going to be added sugars. So it's a very important thing to look at. Going back to the rule of fives, try to keep added sugars or sugar in general under about 5 grams per serving. Sugar is very important to look at, especially with people that are pre-diabetic or that might have diabetes. It's a very important thing to look at. Also, sugar that is not utilized in the body is converted to fat. So be careful of the front label if it says low fat or reduced fat, because usually that means that there's going to be added sugar. So just some of the items that might have this are yogurts, ketchup, a lot of sauces, so just be very aware of that. Now going back to sodium, I just want to let you know that low sodium is going to be about 135 milligrams in that package. Some items might say no sodium or reduced sodium. Even though it says low sodium, it still is allowed to have up to 35 milligrams of sodium. So for people that are very sensitive to sodium, just be aware of this. And that's all I have for food labels.
Hi, my name is Christina. I'm a registered dietitian and I'm here to talk to you all about food recommendations for therapeutic diets. Now you're probably wondering, how am I going to do that if I'm not a registered dietitian or nutritionist? Don't worry, I know we have different clients that come in with different disease states, and the most common ones that we've seen are diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and inflammation. So I'm just going to talk to you guys just a little bit about some foods that encompass all of those disease states and really what to recommend for them. We actually have these wonderful cheat cards. So mine is going to be on the blue card, and right here you'll have a side for both dry pantry and fresh rescue. It's on each of the cards, so you don't have to worry about asking for them. They're always going to be available. But really, just breaking down each of the disease states, for diabetes, we're really trying to help manage their blood sugar. Now, this can be a little bit difficult because I know it can dive into what type of diabetes they have. Don't worry, we're just going to be focusing on how to manage it from a food perspective. So a lot of things that can really help with that are fiber. Fiber is a really important nutrient as it helps keep you full longer as well as manage your blood sugar. Now, when talking about cardiovascular disease, this is talking about any heart disease that we may have or that we may see our clients having, which a lot that can actually influence this are the amount of sodium that's in their diet. So we see sodium in a lot of processed and canned foods. So we'll talk a little bit about how to maybe avoid or limit those things. And lastly, for inflammation, these are people who have a lot of chronic stress in their lives or maybe through an autoimmune disorder such as arthritis. So we'll talk about what foods can also help with that. Thankfully, all three of those disease states have very many foods in common. So the things I want to highlight for all of those, you guys will utilize in your pantry run. So first off, fresh fruits and vegetables are really important. Not only are they full of nutrients such as many minerals and vitamins as well as fiber, but they're also really easy to grab in the food and nutrition pantry, and we always have an abundance of them. So whenever you're able to, I would grab plenty of those for them. Also with fiber, as I said, fresh fruits and vegetables also have a lot of fiber, but other things that have it are whole grains, which we can see in whole grain bread, whole wheat bread, oatmeal. We also can do brown rice as well, and legumes. So those are all good options. And again, they're seen on your card here. Another thing to look forward to is their protein. So typically we want to look at more lean protein sources, and so these include chicken, mostly white chicken, such as chicken breast, as well as beans, such as black or pinto that you may see on the shelves. You could also try fish, and if they don't have any cooking facilities, another good option are canned tuna, as well as canned chicken. Fats are also really important. We want to avoid things that are trans or saturated fats, as that can really exacerbate most likely the cardiovascular disease. But overall, we want to try to limit their fat content. So really trying to find lower fat items is really important. So examples of this would be some maybe avocado, as well as olive oil whenever we have that in stock, as well as nuts and nut butters such as peanut butter or almond butter. Some other things to look for are their canned content. So what I mean by this is when you're in the dry pantry and you're doing a dry run, really looking at, is it low in sodium or is it in water? These can make a really huge difference when choosing items for your client, especially if they're trying to have lower sodium. And lastly, on the dry pantry, as well as looking if they have a lot of sugar content. So I know sometimes we have applesauce. Picking options that are like unsweetened would be probably the best, or things in water. So fresh fruit in water, if you ever see those with the mixed cups, those are also a good option as well. So I know that's a lot, and again, you have these for a reference. And again, one side is for dry pantry, the other side is for fresh rescue. Now, it's not your responsibility to teach your client about what to eat, but more so to provide them with healthy and nutritious options if you were to find out that they have one of those 3 disease states. If they ever have any other additional questions, you're more than welcome to utilize our other resources as well. So we've actually partnered up with Leah's Pantry, and a lot of what they've given to us are wonderful hand sheets that are provided in the FNC Pantry. You'll see them as soon as you enter, and they're also available in the breezeway. And pretty much it's a breakdown of what we discussed along with different food options for them, so that if they want to take a handout home with them, we can provide that to them as well. And also, if they want to have a one-on-one session with our registered dietitian, and they can actually do that. So we ask that you talk to your team lead in helping them schedule their appointment with Anne. And again, if you have any additional questions, please refer to your blue handout or to your team lead. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Anne, and I'm here today to talk to you about gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan, and vegetarian meal plans, which are things that you might see in the food pantry. So just to start off, I want to explain why somebody might be following one of these meal plans. First and foremost, it could be for a medical reason. For example, with gluten-free and dairy-free, somebody might have a wheat or dairy allergy, or they could have something called celiac disease or a non-celiac gluten intolerance where they don't digest these foods very well. So other reasons that people might follow these, I know gluten-free especially is kind of gaining traction as a fad diet. And so some people might be doing it just to try to improve the diversity of their diet or for other health reasons. So in order to make sure that we still provide the best, most dignified experience for them, it's really best to just treat all of them as if it's for a medical reason. So we're going to start with gluten-free, and I just want to start by telling you guys that we have these cards available. They're the green cards. They can be found on all CRC shopping carts for both Fresh Rescue and the pantry. And on these cards, you'll find for each of these dietary patterns, foods to include and foods to avoid, and if there are any other tips or things that you would need to know about them. So to start with gluten-free, so on the cards, you'll see at the top the foods that should be included in a gluten-free dietary pattern, and at the bottom are foods to avoid. So really the big thing to avoid are grains that contain gluten. The big thing that we will see in the CRC is wheat, because it's in a lot of processed products, breads, cookies, crackers, things like that. So other grains that contain gluten are listed on your green cards in case we should have spelt or barley or rye. Those are things that you may see as well. So those do contain gluten, and you'd want to exclude those for somebody who is following a gluten-free dietary pattern. Other foods that have sort of come up with question marks from people are soy and corn. So soy and corn are actually gluten-free, and the other big one is oats. So oats are gluten-free, but you may still see them labeled as gluten-free oats because of cross-contamination that can happen if an oat field is next to a wheat field, or if there's cross-contamination during the processing process. So with that, another important thing to reminder, and this is also on your cards, is that gluten-free or wheat-free foods will have an allergy warning on them because wheat is a major allergen. So by the ingredients or by the nutrition facts, you'll see a little allergen statement that says that this food contains wheat or it was processed in a facility that also processes wheat products. And an important thing to remember with this, while it can be a really good and useful guide, is that wheat-free does not necessarily mean gluten-free. So it's really best to look for foods that are labeled exclusively gluten-free. For dairy-free, this is a much more familiar dietary pattern for most people because lactose intolerance is very common in the US. So again, on your cards, at the top you'll see a list of foods to include, and at the bottom, foods to avoid. So with the foods to include, the plant-based milk alternatives are ones that you'd want to include. So milks, cheeses, and yogurts that are made from almond, coconut, oat, or soy are going to be really good alternatives to the dairy foods, milk, cheese, butter, creamer, any of those foods. So again, just like wheat, dairy is a major allergen, so there will be an allergen statement on the food. So it will be by the nutrition facts or by the ingredient list, and again, it will say this food contains dairy or it has been processed in a facility that also processes dairy products. So finally, vegan and vegetarian meal plans. So vegetarian meal plans can be kind of confusing because there are so many different types. So for this one, on the green card labeled vegetarian, at first you'll see a list of the types of vegetarian eating patterns that there are. And this can include pescatarian, lacto-ovo-vegetarian, ovo, and just regular lacto-vegetarian, and then vegan is by itself. So vegetarians do not consume any animal flesh, except for pescatarians who do consume fish. But other than that, you'll see a list here. It'll tell you the type of vegetarian and what they do eat, so that if somebody walks in and tells you that they're lacto-ovo-vegetarian, you can easily reference this card to figure out what would be good foods to include for them. So just like the gluten-free and dairy-free cards, you'll have a list of foods to include and foods to avoid. So for foods to include, this is common for all of these eating patterns, so fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and then plant sources of protein, because we're replacing the meat in the diet to make sure that they still have a balanced dietary pattern. You will want to include some plant replacements. So examples of these are legumes, beans, tofu, tempeh, nuts, and seeds, and then plant sources of healthy fats such as avocados, nuts, seeds, and olive oils. And for foods to avoid for a vegetarian eating pattern, I actually will have you take a look at the vegan side of the card. So vegans do not consume any animal products, so they completely exclude dairy, meat, anything that contains an animal product. So the foods to include are actually the same as the vegetarian side. So you definitely want to emphasize the legumes, beans, tofu, tempeh, nuts, and seeds. But for foods to avoid, obviously for vegan, you'd want to exclude meat, fish, dairy, and then there are some that can be hiding in other types of foods that you wouldn't necessarily realize at first. So things like red food coloring, gelatin, foods that are fortified with omega-3s or vitamin D, whey or casein proteins, animal stocks. Even in vegetable soups, there may be a chicken or beef stock, and traditional refried beans are cooked in lard. So definitely things to kind of look out for, especially in packaged foods in the front of the CRC. And then one last final note, so we have partnered with CRC to come up with a way to help make sure that vegans and vegetarians are still getting enough protein and getting a well-rounded, diverse diet. And so what we've done is during Fresh Rescue, when you would go back to get the meat product, if there are no meat-free alternatives, so such as tofu, tempeh, things like that, we can now substitute one bean, nut, or legume product in place of each item that they should have received from Fresh Rescue. So for example, if you have a family of 3 that you're helping and they were supposed to get 3 meat products, but we don't have anything in the back, we can now substitute them with three additional products that will not cost them any points. So for example, they could get a can of chickpeas, a bag of lentils, and a container of peanuts, for example. So if you do have any questions, you can always, of course, reach out to Yanira, the Food and Nutrition Center manager, as well as Anne, the dietitian, if you have any other questions about helping these clients come through and get a well-rounded vegan, vegetarian, gluten-free, or dairy